So this is a laundry room I'm going to remodel. It's nice. It'd be great if I was using the garage as an entry point for the house, but the garage is my shop and I'm not about to give that up. So this is never going to be an entry point. It's got the whole like cubbies thing for dropping like muddy clothes and backpacks and whatever you come to the door. It's got your traditional coat closet that you would have if you were coming in through the garage. This would be awesome if we actually park in the garage, but I use basically the whole garage as my shop. And yeah, I'm going to stack the washer dryer. This is like 15 years old. This is our old one, and this is actually my dad's old one. It's even older. But we're getting a new washer and dryer. We're going to stack those right on top of each other. Going to get rid of this, open it up here so it doesn't feel so crammed, and going to replace this very, very 80s Formica wood sandwich countertop. I do like that sink though. We're also going to replace this tile flooring because it's just really slippery and doesn't really add anything to the room. Do something a little bit nicer there. Enough about the room though. It's time to tear this place apart and put it back together. Okay, demo's done. It was a pain in the butt, but it went pretty smooth. Demo's just always difficult. I've got a lot of a lot of drywall patching to do. And get this, so when I was pulling up the tile, you know, it's a 1988 house, so it actually had the original floor beneath it, this beautiful yellow linoleum. So I was thinking about putting some laminate in here, but I think I'm just gonna leave it. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna pull all this up, put a new underlayment in, patch the drywall, get a fresh coat of paint, new floor in, then I can really get to the fun stuff.
Before we get to the fun stuff, give me a minute to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Samsung Healthy Home. Stay tuned to the end of the video to learn more about Samsung's Smart Dial washer and dryer and cordless stick vacuum. Did you know that 5% of Americans only wash their sheets once a year? Did you also know the average person sheds 9 pounds of skin per year? That means 8 hours a night, 365 days a year, times 2 if you're married. 5% of Americans are sleeping with up to 6 pounds of human flesh in their bed. That's why we wash our sheets every week to keep our home healthy. With Samsung's Smart Dial washer and dryer that I'm installing and its steam-powered sanitation cycle, antimicrobial clean guard doors, and load sensing technologies, I can keep the flesh out of my bed while keeping my sheets super clean and without wasting any extra water. Now let's get to the fun stuff.
Hey Google, play some music.
This design relies on bringing in a ton of natural elements to make the space more warm and inviting, so we might actually fold some clothes in there. This started with a new red oak countertop and 4 red oak floating shelves, but first I had to mill up all of the boards. For the shelves, I just skip planed the boards, since they were reasonably flat to start with. For the countertop though, I also jointed the edges, so I glued them up into a countertop without wasting a whole bunch of material. I used the countertop that I pulled out of the old laundry room as a template to build the new countertop. This way I wouldn't have to run any new plumbing or even cut out a hole for the sink. It also allowed me to use some scraps and offcuts, so I wouldn't have to buy any more material. Once I had the fit reasonably worked out for all the pieces, I clamped them together and marked for dominoes. These dominoes are just for alignment while the glue dries, and I could have just as easily used biscuits, but I don't have a good plate joiner right now. I then carefully glued everything together, being sure to line up all the witness marks for a clean panel, and clamped everything together and let the glue dry overnight. The next day, I took the new red oak countertop out of clamps and used the old countertop to scribe the edge of the finished countertop and cut it with my track saw. With the countertop cut to its final dimensions, I added a half-inch round over to any of the exposed faces on the counter and sanded the countertop smooth down to 150 to get it ready for finish. I normally hate red oak, but it grows literally like weeds in Missouri, so it's dirt cheap and fairly durable. I think I finally found a multi-step finish process that makes the red oak look nice too. It starts with a coat of black water-based stain. This gets deep into the grain of the wood to highlight the figure of the wood. After sanding that top layer of the black stain back down with 150 grit sandpaper, leaving it with a few low spots on the wood, I followed up with water-based Jacobian stain and wiped it off until the color was consistent across the whole surface. Finally, I finished the wood with 3 coats of Total Boat's Halcyon Amber to give it that bulletproof top coat. I'll include links to all these products in the description in case you want to make some red oak that you can actually stand to look at. And this is Rick immediately regretting reusing the cast iron sink. Next, it was time to repeat the finish process on the 4 floating shelves. These would each be 11¼ inches deep and 48 inches long, and receive the same round over as the countertop before being attached to the studs with industrial-looking steel hardware. I'm not going to include a lot of clips of me finishing these shelves because it's basically the same as the countertop, but this was a great activity to just put some good tunes on in the headphones and get to work. With the shelves installed, it was time to build the mirrored lower cabinet to the sink in the opposite corner to create an area to fold clothes. This was made a lot easier with Craig's adjustable cutting system and track saw. I made all the cuts for the lower in, no kidding, maybe under an hour. I had the whole lower cabinet batched out, glued up, and painted in under a day. The entire cabinet was going to be assembled with pocket holes, save the lower shelf that would be dadoed and glued in. So I set my dado stack to a 1/2 inch high and plowed the dados into the 2 side panels and cut a notch for the toe kick before I began assembly. I glued the bottom shelf into the dado and attached the structural toe kick, ensuring that everything was square and the cabinet was starting to take shape. After screwing in the 4 supports, I built the face frame and glued and tacked it into place before sanding and painting the cabinet. This cabinet was going to be getting a concrete countertop, so I cut a sheet of cement board the same size as the top of the cabinet to install my pour in place form to. I used about 160 pounds of concrete with 2 bags of silicone additive for the 2 by 4 foot countertop before screeing and finishing the countertop and covering it for a couple of days to slowly dry. We wanted a more organic looking countertop, so we actually used aggregate cement. If you wanted something smoother, you could use sanded cement. But once I removed the forms, I realized a problem with the aggregate concrete is that almost nothing can break up those rocks in the cement. So I actually busted out this cool lapping plate I got for flattening my sharpening stones, and it worked a treat at smoothing out the concrete surface to get it ready for a finish. Nothing cuts quite like diamonds. I put a link to this in the description if you want to check it out. After wiping down the countertop, I used a nap roller to apply 4 coats of concrete finish before moving on to the cabinet doors. The cabinet door frames are going to be made out of poplar with a panel made of 1/4-inch MDF. We really wanted just some simple, almost shaker style doors. I milled the poplar and bashed it out to the finished lengths I would need. It's usually best practice to leave excess to trim your final dimensions, but I didn't quite buy enough material to allow for that comfortably. I carefully labeled everything before setting up to cut the slots in the rails and stiles using a dado stack. I cut a few test pieces before batching out the slot cuts. I wanted them to fit snug since I would be gluing in the MDF panel. A dado stack can do a lot of really cool things, but it's also one of the most dangerous tools to use in your workshop, so be very careful when setting one up. The spinning mass of the blade stack is one of the biggest sources of dangerous kickback in a shop. After cutting the slots, I use the same dado blade to also cut the shoulders for the tenons. When you cut mortise and tenon joinery on rail and style cabinet doors like this, it's usually good enough to use the slot itself as the mortise rather than plowing a deeper mortise. When assembling the cabinet doors, I also added a dab of glue into the slot for the MDF panel. Since the panel is MDF rather than solid wood, the movement is going to be negligible, but the glue is going to add a lot of rigidity to the door to prevent it from racking. With these larger cabinet doors and the smaller rails and stiles, I needed all the strength I could get. After the glue dried, I sanded all the joints flush and drilled for the cabinet hardware. The old cabinets are mounted with surface mount hinges, but I replaced them with face frame Euro hinges for a cleaner look. These hinges are super easy to install and come with great directions on how to pre-drill for them, but it's a good reason to keep a sharp 40mm force nibbit around, just in case. After pre-installing the hinges to the door and ensuring they were square to the back edge of the door, I mounted and leveled the cabinet doors to the cabinet lowers. Using some scrap wood and a little CA glue, I made a drill guide to install my door hardware, and the laundry room remodel was done. We're super happy with how this laundry room remodel came out, and we've been getting a ton of great use out of it. I want to thank the sponsors for today's video, Home Depot and Samsung. And if you want to check out the Smart Dial washer and dryer from Samsung or their new stick vacuum, I've linked to them from Home Depot at the top links in the description. This washer and dryer are so well thought out. Not only are they stackable, but they have an optional control cable to give you access to all the drying modes from the washer and AI-assisted recommended cycles based on the last wash cycle you ran. I have to say, we've been getting a lot more use out of the stick vacuum than I expected. With all these remodel projects lately, and well, with me typically covered in sawdust, it's nice to have a cleaning station handy to pick up the little presents that I always leave laying around. The HEPA filtration also ensures that all the sawdust stays out of the air and keeps the house clean and safe. For those of you who've hung around to the end, thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing. And remember, keep your tools sharp and keep your mind sharper. And be sure to check out some of these other videos of home remodeling projects I've done in the past.